Hey up! As you know, I reviewed the Super Meteor 650 from Royal Enfield a few weeks ago, and I asked for input from viewers, what would you most like to know about this bike that hasn't been covered in the various videos that I've made on the subject. Now, things didn't exactly go according to plan. I'd intended sort of filming something to demonstrate the main questions asked, but as you know, I got COVID during the second week that I had the bike and wasn't able to carry out that filming. And Royal Enfield understandably wanted the bike back, so I'm gonna have to sort of make do with what footage I have. And the reason that you're seeing videos of the Royal Enfield Interceptor 650 is because by far the most frequently asked question was which of these two bikes would be the best for touring. In fact, that seems to be a question that everyone wants to know about every bike that I review, because we all aspire to doing a bit of touring. The reality is that it's probably less than 5% of the riding we generally sort of do on a bike. But some people do more touring than others, and some people lend more weight to the purchasing decision than others on the touring capabilities of a bike, and I totally get that. Now, I'll reiterate what I've said in a lot of previous videos. You can tour on any motorcycle. You don't have to look for something specific to what you think your touring needs are. Any bike will tour. So the premise of this video is my honest opinion. If someone was to ask me, I really want a touring bike, it's got to be as touring specific as possible, which of these two bikes would you recommend that I get? And as I say, I'm going to answer this question honestly. It doesn't mean that I like one bike more than I like the other bike. It's just my honest opinion based on my experience of both motorcycles. As an answer to that question, I'm not going to do a full blow-by-blow review on both motorcycles, so I've already done that. And if you want to see those reviews, the information top right-hand corner of your screen will take you to both of those reviews. The great thing about both of these bikes is the engine. They both have the same engine, 650cc air oil-cooled motor, which I've got to say, it's an absolute peach. More than enough power for touring, unless of course you have a very small gentleman's sausage, in which case of course you will have to compensate for that by buying a much larger and more powerful motorcycle. My personal view is that this twin-cylinder motor is especially suited for large journeys, and I mean 5-10,000 mile journeys. The reason being that with just one or two additional tools added to your toolkit and the ability to purchase a suitable oil on your travels, you can quite literally carry out a full service on these motorcycles at the side of the road, which I think gives these, and a lot of Royal Enfield motorcycles for that matter, a bit of an edge over the mainstream. Some of these more expensive motorcycles might have longer intervals between your valve adjustments, but you need a dealership when it comes to that being required. And even if you are confident enough to carry it out yourself, you'll need a lot more tools on board, and you'll also need the right size shims for adjusting those valves. Traditional lock nut tappets are a definite advantage for very long expeditions. So a trip around the world or even a trip across the states, these bikes are eminently suited to that type of long distance travel. And just in case you're one of those ignorant people that knows nothing about Royal Enfield and you want to jump into the comments section now and say, yeah, but by the time these bikes have reached 10,000 miles the engines are knackered, the rest of us know that's not true. These bikes and these engines stand the test of time. And distance, for that matter. Now, the Interceptor does have a theoretical weight advantage over the Super Meteor. It's considerably lighter. A pretty low centre of gravity. Now, obviously, weight doesn't matter when you're riding the bike, but, as we all know, from time to time, you need to manhandle those bikes. Extracting them from the garage, or trying to insert them, or get them out of parking spaces. And that's the only place really where the additional weight of the Super Meteor is noticeable. Now, the Super Meteor to me seems to carry its weight even lower, so if I'm totally honest, it's not really noticeable. The only time you do notice it is when you first try to sort of push the bike off and actually get it rolling. It does require a little bit more effort. But once you've got it moving, I would say both bikes really are about the same. Yes, a little bit more effort is required when manhandling, but it's not a huge amount. Now, as far as the comparison of these two bikes as tourers goes, it's got to be out of the crate. Obviously, you know, you can make alterations to both of these bikes to make them better in one respect or another. I don't want to get into that. I want to stick to the specifications out of the crate. The Interceptor 650 is a fantastic little touring bike. Comfort out of the box is reasonable. The suspension front and rear, generally speaking, behave themselves very well, but both have the limitations, and those limitations do tend to intrude on comfort over long distances, with the standard seating configuration probably not helping matters. The seating position is comfortable up to a degree, but I generally found that by the time I've reached about 70 miles, I'm definitely thinking about, getting off for a comfort break. The bike doesn't come as standard with any navigational aids, so obviously you're either going to have to buy Royal Enfield's Tripper or get yourself a more conventional sat-nav. Now, every rider's endurance is different. Some people have found they can't travel 70 miles. They've got to get off at 50 miles for a break. Some people will say they can stay in the saddle all day. I'm not going to argue with that. We're all different. And to be honest, touring is not an iron butt challenge. It's about enjoying yourself. I personally, like to get off for a leg stretch every 50 to 70 miles anyway. And once I've sort of reached my target destination, what I tend to do is I find a place to sort of act as a base camp, like a hotel or a campsite, and then I'll use that as a hub to travel out from. So, that sort of limitation on long distance travel all at once isn't a major thing for me. It may be for some. Now, suspension wise, the Super Meteor is very well equipped. We have the upside down shower front forks, which I've got to say, over the mileage I covered, which was considerable, I never got them to misbehave once. They seem to handle everything that you throw at them. And whereas the rear suspension on the Interceptor is a little bit on the soggy side and needs tightening up substantially to get what I consider to be stable springing, the rear suspension on the Super Meteor is the other way round. It's quite stiff. Now, stick a pillion on the back and or some luggage and, it may not feel as compromised. But this behaviour really only shows up at low speeds. Once you get up to cruising speed, sort of 40 miles an hour and above, it behaves perfectly. The suspension on the hull on the Super Meteor seems to be geared up for high-speed, long-distance travelling. I'm not so sure that the Interceptor is. Obviously, it can be adapted. I've made those adaptations on my own Interceptor. But out of the box, the suspension setup on the Interceptor is a bit compromised, whereas the Super Meteor seems to have been built with a touring purpose in mind. It also has a more comfortable sculpted saddle, which assists even more with comfort. Now, certainly the second day filming that I had with this bike, I really had to cram the miles in. And I didn't start to notice any discomfort, and it was only slight discomfort, until I'd hit round about the 100-mile mark. So if you're the kind of rider that likes to tour and you want to cover very long distances on a daily basis, the Super Meteor, comfort-wise, is far less of a compromise than the Interceptor. Now, it's got to be said that the seating position, I think, does help with this. The foot forward position for me is a very alien one. As I've said in the past, I'm not into cruisers. They've never really interested me. The foot forward position seemed initially to be very alien. I mean, I kept picking my feet up as I set off and completely missed the foot pegs because they just weren't where I expected them to be. But once you get used to it, it's actually extremely comfortable. It becomes second nature within a very short space of time, and I've got to say, I am a bit of a convert to this sort of style of seating position. The other thing that can't be ignored, of course, is the fact that the Super Meteor comes equipped as standard with the 10x10 navigation aid, the Tripper. It's not a fully fledged sat-nav. It has its limitations, and it is going to draw power from the battery on your phone because it relies on a Bluetooth link between your phone and the Tripper. Some people get on with it, some people don't, but you can't ignore the fact that it's there, and it is going to be an aid to touring. A navigation aid of any description is going to be a cost option for the Interceptor. I think you probably know where this is heading now. Finally, luggage. The biggest limiting factor with luggage on the Interceptor 650 is the style of those upswept pipes. They take up a lot of space behind the pillion pegs, and they are a major limiting factor when selecting any type of pannier to go on the back of this bike. Royal Enfield did come up with their own sort of triangular shaped option. It's better than nothing, but again, it's limited in capacity. And I'm sorry to say this, Royal Enfield, but if you take the panniers off and leave your luggage rails on, as most of us do, the luggage rails look silly. There are, of course, other options like a tail pack, but then you're not going to be able to take a pillion, or a rucksack or backpack, but again, that compromises the comfort of the pillion. I suppose you could look at some sort of tank bag, but you know, if you're having to carry everything you need for a week's journey, you're going to have to pack very light with an Interceptor. Luggage options for the Interceptor are always going to be a compromise, I'm afraid. And I personally think that this is the Interceptor's biggest limiting factor as a tourer. Yes, I know with some ingenuity and money you can get around it, but it's always going to be a compromise. Now, the contrast to that with the Super Meteor is not only does it have specific luggage mounting points, it also has more conventional horizontal silencers which free up a lot of space for decent sized luggage. Now, Royal Enfield do make an option that can be fitted to this bike which looks pretty good. They also do a higher spec version of this bike that comes with it. If that luggage option doesn't suit you, it's not going to be long before, you know, the well-known names in luggage are going to come across with something that you can live with. It isn't going to be the same sort of compromise that luggage is going to be for the Interceptor. It's hard to avoid these days, whichever country you live in. Inevitably, we all end up doing part of our journey, at least, on a motorway or freeway or whatever it's known as where you live. There's no doubt about it, the Super Meteor makes for much more relaxed motorway driving. I suppose the clue is in the name. It's a cruiser and it excels in this department. I've got to admit, if I had a choice of doing some long motorway miles on an Interceptor or a Super Meteor, I would use the Super Meteor, even without the screen, every time. Now, for the purpose of this video, you've got to put aside the looks or the styling of these two bikes. I'm purely approaching this video as to which I consider to be the more accomplished tourer. And I've got to say, that title has to go to the Super Meteor. I mean, this isn't really a surprise. You can tell from Royal Enfield's initial launch and the marketing and the fact that they make a touring-specific version of the Super Meteor. This bike was designed with touring in mind. The Interceptor wasn't. And the thought that's gone into the Super Meteor for that purpose certainly has paid dividends. There's no doubt about it in my mind. It's the better of the two bikes for touring. Now, if you own an Interceptor or you're looking to buy an Interceptor, there's no need to spit your dummy out over that. The Interceptor is a fantastic bike. I can't fault it. It is a very good tourer. But the Super Meteor is better for that purpose. I was asked, and that is my answer. Right, once again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this and my other videos, and in doing so helping to support this channel. I really appreciate it. You can also support this channel through Patreon or by use of the super thanks button just below the video. Alternatively, just leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I am, of course, going to be back next week, so until then, please ride safely, and I'll see you soon.